was the first question? Hi, my name is Tim Stigliano. I'm a fine artist working in Portland, Oregon, and I make drawings, sculpture, video, performance art, mostly inspired by pornography and horror movies. Within that genre of thinking, I make altered magazines, assemblages out of a lot of different household materials, stuff that's at hand, easy to find around the house. Let's see, architectural models based on spaces that serial killers have used. In other words, I'll just use like foam core, things that architects would use in like Architecture School 101. And I'll make, say, the crawl space based on John Wayne Gacy's house in Chicago. And I'll take that space and make it a formal box and then transform it into a number of different things and add materials to it as well. So it starts out as an architectural guideline so I can build something life-size out of, and then I'll add things around the house like socks and crawl space dirt and just things I have at home, and I call them additions. So materials stack up and they add to the initial idea. So I have that project that I'm working on right now, as well as these altered magazines where I'll take I have a series called Club Fangoria that I'm working on right now, where I'll take Club magazine and I'll add things to it or subtract things from it. I'd like to in the future make them into a printed edition. I'll do the same thing with Fangoria magazines, something like a paper chain or paper airplanes. Really easy stuff. Some of them I've actually I made an urn, burned the magazine, and placed the magazine that's been burned inside of the urn. It's a nod to Marcel Duchamp. Let's see what else. Videos, a lot of short, like somewhere between like 1 second and, I have some like 20-minute videos as well, but they're all really short, and a lot of the ideas are coming from horror movies or things I've seen in porno tubes online and stuff, where I'll just take a short like clip, and it could be anything from camera placement or weird lighting that I'm inspired by, an Argento movie or something like that, and I'll light it weird and set the camera up and just go. Things like, cars peeling out and stuff like that. Let's see, pumpkins on fire, things that have to do with Halloween, things that I really like. But mainly taking things that I'm inspired by and really creating an imaginary universe around those things. Really because I feel like there's a lot of power in some cases the sort of dark places where our minds go sometimes when we're at work and our boss says something he shouldn't have said to us. I can take it home, think about it, and make something constructive and formally beautiful with those things. And performance work usually comes later on when some projects have stacked up and coalesced into something that might be a little bit more meaty, and I can do those things in a space. And all of those projects combined together become what I sort of think of as this imaginary world that I've created that's conceptually driven by horror movies, pornography, and formally tied together with things that I think are beautiful. Some more minimally driven things, some things that are kind of slouchy and weird and unexpected, mostly with the assemblages that I do with the household materials. And more often than not, I'm surprised by the results, and what better way to move forward with your practice than to continue making things that you're surprised by and to continue to look for something that's beautiful, and to maybe some people it might not seem that they're not really sure where to place the things that I've made, but a lot of it is coming from this place of a dark sort of imaginary world, and definitely using other contemporary fine artists to frame the work and think about how, say, to finish a piece. I have a series of videos where I made this tiny little sculpture and then I shot it in my attic and navigated the space around it. And it was kind of like a sort of twisted interrogation room, but it's about this sculpture that I made. So really combining all of my interests into one piece that may have started out very simple becomes more and more interesting just by looking at it from a number of different angles, literally in this case, but also formally from taking from some of my favorite artists and directors and just stuff I see around town, honestly. Some of the best pieces I've ever made have come from casual conversations with either coworkers at my job or just on the street. So I'm really excited to talk about places I've shown, and I don't need to necessarily talk about specific places I've shown, but I've had some recognition and some really great opportunities. Actually, some of them just gotten from, pounding the pavement and networking, or actually just, hanging gallery shows, which I did for a really long time, and getting to know people around town. But they're just opportunities where most of the time someone challenges me with some conceptual idea that I will respond to and make a piece about. And yeah, one piece I did was in response to a show where there was a couple of different artists showing in a gallery above us, and I crawled into a crawl space, and basically it made myself sound like I was drowning because it was alluding to this flood that happened a long time ago in Portland, and I wanted to project light up into the space, which was reference to one of the pieces upstairs, which was a projected light piece, and another piece downstairs, which was a video piece. So I had the projected light going, and then the drowning was an allusion to the flood that had happened. So it was a way of tying the show together for me. I helped actually install the show, but it was a way of tying all of the pieces together as a tribute, but also to do something that was maybe like, wait, how did that guy get in the crawl space? That's a little weird. Why is he gurgling this water, and why is he kind of screaming? It's very, very strange. And I kind of feel like the piece maybe went a little bit unnoticed, but I was okay with that. There was something about the hiding aspect, or the what is happening thing, that frequently with the, if it's an enticing sort of erotic kind of scene, it's like never actually seeing what you really want to see. In the, say, monster movies, it's like you never get to see it. Some of the most effective monster movies are when you never really see what it is that you really want to see, even though you don't want to see it. So I've been able to do a couple things like that. And yeah, it's just like a great, I love being able to show work. And when you get that opportunity to be challenged, it's even that much more satisfying to try something you've never really tried before. So I don't have any gallery representation or anything like that, but that's okay with me. I'm just really happy making the work that I make. And, they say just make the work that you want to make and find a place to show it. So that's what I'm doing right now. I make work in my basement in Portland, Oregon. It's a really important component to my practice. When I was in graduate school, I had never really had a studio before, and I was always kind of ashamed, like, this guy makes these tiny paintings that he makes on his lap, and they're kind of weird and sort of erotic and very strange and imaginative and stuff, but I never realized until I was tested that the space where I make the work is at home. And I think home is a really powerful place to make your work, because it makes you think about not only the wonderful things that your home has to, it's a place where you can feel like you are yourself. There's a kind of safe haven about it, but it's also a place where you start digging and crawling into things like, crawl spaces and basements and attics and things like that, where you can explore things with the lights off, and maybe you start to see a side of yourself that you didn't really know was there before. So actually living in Portland is wonderful because I can rent a house and have space in a basement, and have a little bit of room for storage and collecting materials, but also be able to play a little bit. And I don't necessarily feel like I'm sort of trapped by the white wall of the studio, where it was almost like the studio to me is almost like a blank canvas, which actually was really quite daunting for me as a painter in my 20s. Kind of didn't know what to paint. It was filled with possibility, but also a tremendous amount of fear because of all the people that are such amazing painters. But being in a basement, I can kind of hide and really figure out what it is I want to do, and not be so necessarily concerned with the way things might look in a gallery, despite the efforts that I make to make things showable and also multidisciplinary, only in the way that I could show a video that could also be a photograph, that could also be a sculpture. They can be shown in a number of different ways. But the basement for me is a real wonderful place to explore really who I am and what it is that I want to share. And that space itself, while maybe scary, is also actually very, very beautiful to me. So I think a really good way to illustrate what's going on in my head, it would be to just take, for example, this is an architectural model that I made. It's foam core and contact paper that you would line your drawers with. And I'm trained as a cabinet maker, and it's a way of kind of combining my building knowledge, but with also just some sort of cheap kind of store-bought thing. So this is a 2-scale model of a bigger space that I built in real life. It was a crawl space. There was a video inside with a peephole, and you saw me dressed like John Wayne Gacy as the clown character, and I was flagellating myself with cream pies. So I'll take this model and I will add something like stuffed socks to it, and I'll show you how I do that. I've messed with this thing so many times it just keeps coming apart, but you get the idea. It's both architectural model, but it's also become an assemblage. Or I like to actually, assemblage isn't the word I like to use. I like to use the word an arrangement, which comes from actually just watching my mom set up her house over and over and over again with lots of different things that she had collected. Around Christmas time, of course, it was like Santas and stuff, but there was always something really neat to watch her totally obsessively, compulsively decorate the house. But this is kind of like a way of combining things that I saw my mom do with some architectural building sort of skills that I know of, and also just these sort of things that I found around the house. So I just more or less finished a series called Hobby. It was honestly just a boast. Like, I make all this stuff that's somehow interconnected in my head, but I still have time to make these pieces called Hobby, which is really specifically about arranging materials. And the ones that mean the most to me are the ones that I wind up having the most of. And as a marker of time, I like collecting these materials because it's a way of, instead of watching a clock or a calendar, you're using materials that you use over and over again. And I like things that have been used before, in some cases, to either clean or they have a sort of dirty quality to them. So in this case, it was kitchen sponges, scrubbing sponges. They've got 2 colors, and I just arrange them like bricks and make a really simple structure. So it is building again, but it's also about the passage of time and all of these unbelievably mundane things that we do in our daily lives to bring order to the chaos of, say, something as silly as the kitchen sink. But once these materials have been used, they start to arc and change color, and they become something that's a little bit different than they were in the beginning. And that transformation, I guess, just thinking off the dome, is a lot like the monster transforming from one state to another. And formally, this may reference a lot of different things, but in the end, it just becomes a small-scale formal sculpture that I can build in my basement based off something that I've collected. And the intention is for this to just grow and grow and grow. And as a marker of time passing, I can say that this is how much time has passed. I couldn't tell you in months, but I can tell you in sponges. So this is a project where I'd like to share because it's a place where the constraints of the basement have really come into play, but also added something to the piece that was obviously not intended. I don't know that anybody would have intended this, but as a sort of reverence to, an artist, say like Bruce Nauman's studio work, where he had surveillance of rats moving around the studio. Well, I made these pieces that were ketchup, mustard on paper towels, and the rats got to them. So this one in particular, let's see. So this is a portrait of Brian Ballot, who has used, if I got the name correctly, who has used those very similar materials in his work. He's used ketchup and mustard on paper. But the rats got to this piece, as well as this piece of it's a portrait of Paul McCarthy, who's also very well known for using these materials, and the rats got to this one too. I guess for some reason the rats aren't fans of Tony Tassett's work, but I am. And this piece has remained untouched, as well as this portrait of Alex Hubbard. So this is something that I've just started working on. And some of it is actually, instead of just portraits, I've just used words. And I'll share with you my favorite one. It's a word I came up with that speaks a little bit about this myth that I've kind of created about being Italian, which I'm kind of not really, but I have an Italian last name, but I like playing with the idea of, I don't even speak Italian, but this is a word I came up with. It's pronounced Guiduigi, like Guido Ouija, but the word is Guiduigi. Same materials on the paper towel. And I've got a number of these, but I really, that moment when I found the rat in the basement was both unplanned, very beautiful. There was a kind of home invasion happening, but really surprising, but also extremely obvious. Like, of course there's going to be a rat munching on the napkins that you made. So I threw a lot of materials out, but these things I've put into a plastic bin, and now I'm pretty happy that I still have them.
Cool. Cutting loose, he's drinking juice.